Okay, let's talk about dividends. We've kind of been talking about them since we've started this chapter, so let's get into a little bit more depth about dividends. So the goal of any corporation is to generate profits. Once generated, a company must decide whether or not to distribute those profits to its owners through what we call dividends. A dividend is a distribution of profits to owners. The decision to distribute any dividend rests with the company's board of directors, which is the group of individuals elected by stockholders to govern the company and represent the interest of all of its owners. The board will consider many factors in its decision, including the financial condition of the company, the cash available for dividends, and the company's past history of dividends. Dividends have really been in the news, particularly today, as I had mentioned for Apple. Apple has taken a lot of criticism over the last couple years because they're sitting on, I think I heard, like $140 billion of cash. And their dividends have not increased for their shareholders. And the shareholders are saying, hey, Apple, give us some of that cash that you've been earning. Remembering that dividends is a distribution of profits, and Apple has chose to keep all of their profits opposed to distributing some of them back to their faithful shareholders. Some of this rests with Apple in the fact, I think it was 15 years ago, Apple was actually almost at bankruptcy, and Steve Jobs swore that he would never be cash poor again in the company. And so they've been really tight-fisted and not giving cash out to the shareholders. And so now I heard that they're going to pay out $100 million in dividends out to the shareholders. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at dividend FAQs. Dividends are most always paid in cash, although they can be paid in other forms such as stock. When dividends are distributed, they are normally stated as a per share amount and are paid only on outstanding shares of stock. So only on the outstanding shares of stock. When and how a company distributes dividends is what we call the company's dividends policy. So once again, only paid on outstanding shares of stock. There are 3 dates that are associated with dividends. When we distribute the cash to shareholders, once again we call that a dividend. It is a return of or a payout of profit to the shareholders or stockholders. The corporate board decides when and what a cash dividend is warranted. It will declare publicly that a dividend will be distributed. So the date on which the board declares the dividend, a liability is created. We call that the date of declaration. At this point, we also make a journal entry. The second date is what we call the date of record. The date of record is the date on which those who receive the dividends are identified. So anybody who owns the stock will be the date of record. At this date of record, there's no journal entry. So no journal entry is prepared. The third and final date associated with dividends is what we call the payment date. This is the date on which the dividend will actually be paid out, and there is another journal entry. So there are 3 dates, 2 of which, 1 and 3, that have a journal entry, and the second one is informationally only and no journal entry. So let's take a look at what it looks like with the journal entry in recording a dividend. So here we're assuming that a company with $1 million $1 million shares of outstanding stock declares a 5-cent per share dividend on November 3rd. The dividend is payable on November 30th to the stockholders of record on November 21. So the first one, the date that's important to us is the date of declaration. Date of declaration. And here we come up with $50,000. That is 1 million shares times 5 cents gives us $50,000. We're going to debit retained earnings, which decreases retained earnings because we're paying out profits, and we credit dividends payable. On November 21st, that is the date of record. Remember, there is no journal entry. No journal entry. And then the final date is November 30th, where we have the payment. We're going to debit dividends payable because we're clearing that, and that's when we're going to pay out the cash. We're going to credit cash for $50,000. So let's go ahead and take a look at this and do one on our own. Once again, we're going to look at page 268, and I'm going to look at exercise number 3. Exercise number 3. So in this problem, has us take a look at dividends a little differently. They always seem to be either cents or percent. They're always going to throw it to you a little different way. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this problem says. Jonathan owns 3% of the common stock of XYZ Corporation. On February 3rd, XYZ declares $3 million in dividends, payable on February 22nd. What amount will Jonathan receive on February 22nd? So in this one, they didn't give you any dollar amounts, but we know that because I own 3% of the stock, that I get to share, that is my share of my investment, and I get to share in assets as well as in dividends. So in this case, I would take the $3 million times the 3%, and I'm going to get $90,000. So $3 million times the 3%, and I'm going to get $90,000 is going to be my dividend. And so so my particular dividend. And so at the date, so the first date of declaration, which is February 3rd, I would do a journal entry. And I'm going to debit, I'm going to abbreviate retained earnings for $90,000. Let's go ahead and put the debit up here. And then I'm going to credit dividends payable, which is a liability anytime you see the word payable, for $90,000. Then on February 22nd, I would in fact get paid. In this case, they don't have a date of record. So on February 22nd, I'm going to debit dividends payable for $90,000, and I'm going to credit cash. Pay out the $90,000. Okay? So here we have the date of record. Excuse me, we have the declaration date. There's no date of record, and then there's the actual payment date. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at number 4 on the same page. Number 4. A company with 2 million outstanding shares of stock declared a 10 cent per share dividend on July 10th. The dividend is payable on July 31st to the shareholders of record on July 17th. Prepare the entries that the company would make on the date of declaration and payment date. What is the total effect of both entries on the stockholders' equity? So the first thing we have to do is we have to take the 2 million shares times the 10 cents, and those shareholders are going to share dividends in the amount of times 10 cents $200,000. So on the date of declaration, we are going to debit retained earnings for $200,000, and we're going to credit dividends payable. And this is July 10th, so 7/10. On the date of record, no entry. On the date of payment, we would debit dividends payable for $200,000, and we're going to credit cash for $200,000. Okay? And so that should show you how we take care of cash dividends.